Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Roger Greene. I lead rural connectivity for Facebook. Thanks for joining us today in the panel to talk about how network as a service can help solve rural connectivity. Let me introduce to you first Juan Campillo from Telefonica, who represents a mobile network operator that not only helped innovate the very first nationwide rural network as a service, but is also committed to developing the platform and becoming an anchor customer for these network as a service.
Thank you, Ray.
Allow me to introduce to you also Gayan Koralage, who represents EDOTCO, a tower company in Asia Pacific, who is actively exploring becoming a network as a service operator. And also Bo White of Macquarie, who's an investor who's actively looking at investing in these projects. Broadband has become the foundation for the digital economy, and it's important to stitch together the social fabric that we've all become accustomed to. Yet there are 1 billion people in rural areas that don't have connectivity or very slow connectivity. So not only is bringing connectivity to these areas an important humanitarian issue, it's also a tremendous market opportunity, potentially $24 billion a year. Yet we're not doing enough to solve that. So I guess for the next couple minutes, we just want to talk about some of the things that we're doing and why this is a new opportunity. So I guess first I'll ask you, Juan, tell us, how is Telefonica thinking about this, and what are you doing to actually solve this problem with network as a service?
Thank you, Roger, and hello, everyone. I think since the last year that we were here explaining some of this concept, a lot has been going on, at least for us. We definitely see this is a huge opportunity for capturing growth, and we're actually capturing it already. It's around 100 million people for us only in Latin America that lives outside of the perimeter of our broadband networks. And we're already seeing ARPUs and consumption levels very similar to the ones we have in urban areas, so it's a clear boost to our revenue lines, which is so needed these days. And it's an obvious need for the mission of any telco operator to expand the connectivity and keep building connectivity for our customers. The way we are solving this is, I think the biggest gap that we see is the funding problem, right? We need to make sure that we attract a relevant amount of capital to build this very capital-intensive infrastructure fast enough. And this is what we have been doing as a company. We have created a product around this network as a service concept, but not only a technology product. It's a product that is a combination of all the technology playbooks that you are seeing here in the TIP, and we have been discussing these days, very focused on reducing the cost. But it's also a product focused on making a clear business model that generates a win-win for our partners, for the builders that will be out there building and operating the networks, and for the investors that will be funding it. And we are building it around 3 basic concepts. Neutrality, meaning that this infrastructure needs to be available for anyone, for us, for our competitors, for MVNOs, for anyone that wants to serve a customer or that has a customer need in these areas. This infrastructure needs to be open. Then we are doing it in a very open way, in the sense that anyone that has anything to contribute, any assets or any relevant operating capacity on the ground, can join the model. Imagine a matryoshka in which we just split the value chain, and anyone that is contributing to any point on the value chain receives a chunk of the revenue share that we are sharing with our partners. So it's open in the building sense of it. And then fast. We need to solve this problem fast. I mean, it's been already a few years since we are talking about this. We are doing it, and for that, the main concept around our vision is simplicity. We need to make a product that is simple enough so others can build networks on our behalf. That's not easy for the telco industry because we are very complex. We are very inspired by companies like McDonald's. If you imagine becoming a franchisee of McDonald's, this is the kind of effort we are doing with all our complexity. We are doing something very simple that is easy to build and operate by tower companies, for instance, and that is very easy to understand and to fund by relevant investors. And we are treating it with all the care of a real product. No? And then finally, we are working very close to the regulator to make sure that we have the right framework that enables us to do this with the right security for the investors and for the builders.
Yep. That's great. Gayan, tell us how this applies in Asia Pacific. How are you guys thinking about this? What's the challenges that you're trying to solve?
Sure. So I'm from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I represent EDOTCO, which is the biggest multi-country tower company, 30,000 towers in 8 countries, 6 in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and we just added 2. Just to give the context right to what you just said earlier, billion people unconnected out of 7.7. Of the 7.7, Asia Pacific represent 44.5 billion. If you take the top 10, 5 of them are Asian countries. If you take the top 5, 3 of them are Asian countries. I was actually mentioning that some of the Asians should be represented in the stage yesterday. Anyway, I assume that Facebook will fix that next year. So coming back to Asia Pacific, our 6 countries is 500 million people, which is Malaysia, Myanmar, Cambodia in Southeast Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and South Asia. And we added Philippines and Vietnam. So the first 6 is about 500 million. The remaining 2 will add another 200 million. Of the 500 million, roughly 25 to 30 million people doesn't have any connectivity at all. That's a starting point. And there is unconnected and underconnected. There's about 100 million out of 500 million doesn't have minimum 30 Mbps as such. So if we are talking about a shared economy, digital economy, and below 40 Gen Zs to catapult themselves into become high income in 2025, 2 months from now, the decade of 2020 starts. Somebody who was born in year 2000 become 20-year-old, and he's going to join the economic value chain. So that person to be successful, you cannot have unconnected or underconnected. But to your question, why is not happening? 2 reasons happen. One, these are areas where are far-flung, which may not have electricity or grid. There are areas where in Myanmar or even Pakistan or even some part of Malaysia, no grid at all. So 100 kilometer by 100 kilometer, no grid. So that's one big issue. Therefore, building a tower is twice as much as expensive. Normal tower is about $75,000 with an off-grid solar panel. Some places you need to take 3 days to go fix it and come back. So all these add to the cost. It's about $200,000 required to build one rural tower, let's say 60-meter tower. And the revenue of our MNO, which is our main customer, earns about 1/10 of it. For example, in Pakistan, per tower, they will earn about $8,000. The rural tower will earn about $800 to $1,000. If you do the maths, after spending $200,000, you earn about $1,000 and it won't make any sense. So the question is, how does network as a service, like Facebook tip, tower companies like us, regulators, to get together, try to solve it? First and foremost, I think conventional method of buying $25,000 of active equipment, installing in a rural tower, $200,000 worth of equipment is not going to work. So what we need to figure out is demystified, simplified, software-defined, it's automatically fixable with a minimum intervention, a network. So that's the starting point. Second point is that the backhauling, it could be on the ground or through the satellite, find the economical way to bring the traffic back to the core network. Thirdly, I think most neglected area is the batteries. Batteries are stolen. Let's say in Malaysia, 5 million worth of batteries are stolen every year, lithium ion or otherwise. We buy them on the second-hand market by ourselves. So we had to find like a battery who survive 10 years, which we bury under concrete and it will be survive forever. And 10th year we go and fix it, something like that. Now the batteries, whether VLR or lithium ion, every third day we have to go and fix it. So these stacks have to be fixed. Finally, I think the commercial model, I just want to hear if there is an independent neutral party host who do these semi-urban sites, whether it's 4G or 5G enabled, to provide the basic telephony or internet, and what is the commercial model behind it. And currently, the government are the people who are putting cash behind it. And that doesn't make sense because that only solves part of the issue. That doesn't solve the big issue. So I would like to hear what the commercial model going forward. And TIP and all the other partners, I would assume in Asia Pacific, should work together to solve this.
Bo, what can you tell us about how the business models are evolving to really actually open up this opportunity to invest? And how are you at Macquarie thinking about this?
Yeah, so at Macquarie we have the luxury of being able to work with players across the telecom ecosystem, right? So we have those early stage conversations with the entrepreneurs that are bringing these really disruptive kind of network as a service models to the kind of mid-stage companies that are really looking to scale, to working directly with the carriers that are looking to attract efficient capital at scale, to innovate and to really do something different. And as we have these conversations across the ecosystem, there's a clear trend in my mind, where when we're talking about kind of network sharing, it obviously started with towers, right? Very established business model, and everyone kind of talks about it as passive network sharing. But we're clearly evolving into a more holistic network as a service model. And it's not just jumping from towers directly into this kind of turnkey holistic model. There's an evolution and there's a pathway, right? It's towers, now we're looking at batteries, we're looking at generators, HVAC units, the cabling, and then moving closer and closer and closer to that turnkey solution. And similarly, we're seeing the low-hanging fruit in the rural markets, right? That's where the carriers tend to be the most collaborative with one another. That's where they're looking for opportunities to initially drive down costs, but we also strongly believe that this trend will ultimately move into the urban, will ultimately move into those kind of core OECD markets as well, and it will be a kind of ubiquitous trend moving forward. So it's a very exciting time, and it's just really interesting to hear all the ideas at this conference, because it's really moving from theory to really practical, large-scale implementations, which really becomes quite interesting and compelling for a bank like Macquarie that wants to bring efficient capital at scale into this space, as opposed to kind of more traditional or early stage kind of equity to get it started. So that's really exciting.
So clearly we have the demand, we have the need, and we have the interest. What are some of the technology gaps as you see it, Juan?
So we are seeing gaps in all the value chain as of now, not only in technology, also in the distribution, for instance. The main bottleneck is obviously the transport and the energy, which at this stage are issues that we are addressing here at the TIP and progressing very well. Transport, I think, is moving relatively fast. Satellite industry and the high-altitude platform industry is also moving to solve this. We expect to have an impact in the next 2 to 3 years and have that more or less solved for the near future. In energy, it's also a clear issue. We have also the same issue that our Asian colleagues have in their operation, which is the theft of the batteries. The way we are solving this kind of issue is not with more technology or more sophistication of the technology. What we are trying to do is make sure that the assets become something that are very close to the community, so that they understand that the telco equipment and all the infrastructure that is deployed there is almost theirs. So it's like the fountain of the main square of the town. You wouldn't ruin that source of water, for instance. That's the kind of spirit that we want to encourage with our business model. So someone that is very close to the community is the actual owner of that infrastructure, and then takes care, making sure that everyone understands that that's an essential asset for the sustainability and the economic progress of the community. That's the kind of things we are doing. On the technology front, I think after all these years of openness, what we are focusing on is on simplicity. We are trying to make technology invisible. We don't think the customer cares about Open RAN. I'm sorry to say that, but they don't care if we connect them with Open RAN or with a traditional equipment, and they don't care about all these technology buzzwords. They just want to be connected. So what we are doing is try to simplify things so our builders, our partners like tower companies, have a very simple way of deploying and operating, and they are not exposed to our complexity. We are a very complex industry, and that we are doing through all this openness, because once we have opened the technology, it's not only a problem of cost structure, it's also a problem of reinventing all the processes and all the interfaces, all the customer pain points to make sure that these franchises, these network as a service companies can do it on our behalf without becoming telcos themselves, which is not easy. So if we want to have this infra cost addressing this issue, they are not going to have the hundreds of or the thousands of employees that we have. They are going to be run by tens of people probably, and that means simplicity. So we are focusing all our efforts at Telefónica these days. Now that we have this model going on and we are deploying and commercially executing is on simplification and I would say making the technology invisible to our partners and making all the business model absolutely simple to our investment partners also, because it can take just all this value chain complexity. If we expose institutional investors to that, they're going to freak out. They're going to say, no, this is too complex. I'm not going to dedicate a whole team of analysts just to understand what you guys are doing. Make it simple. Make it like McDonald's. This is the investment we need. This is the return you expect us to have. Let's fund it and let's do it. That's the kind of that's the kind of philosophy that we have entered since last year. It's moving from openness and cost reduction to simplicity and time to market reduction.
Yep. Look, solving rural connectivity, it's not easy. Doing it sustainable is even harder. It requires different business models. It requires different commercial approaches. It requires different operational models, different technology, everything. And disrupting telecoms for good doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen by ourselves. We need everyone in the ecosystem to come together to work on this solution. And we think network as a service is that solution. So please, while you're here today, join us. Later today, we have a birds of a feather to address the application stack to enable network as a service so that other infracos can start to develop network capabilities in support of extending mobile network operators coverage. We also have a technology and operational challenges panel later this afternoon that includes some of the network as a service operators. Please join us for that. And of course, there are many sessions on RAN and millimeter wave and other modalities to help solve this. Any other closing statements or calls to action to the community?
Yeah, so I just want to pick up from the 2 points my two panelists mentioned. One is simplification. The other one is finding the viable commercial model. I think the solve in the deep rural and semi-urban will help us to find the right path to help to metros. I think the end game has to be fixed in the metro. That's where a large population lives, and Gen Z is going to grow up in those. I'll give you statistics around Malaysia, which is my home market. Cost to manufacture a GB for us is about $1.4, and revenue is about $0.8 US. So we are not breaking even yet. So there's a gap between the revenue versus the cost. And we manufacture 5 exabyte a year, and then so that's 1.4 minus 0.8 into 5 exabyte is industry loss, which is funded by 2G. The day where 2G disappears, and then the industry will be at a loss. So we cannot have the cost structure that steep. That cost structure cannot be 4,000 employees running the show. It has to be simplified, IP-based, cloud-based, edge computed, simplified, and we can bring down the cost per GB to 0.25 or 0.1. I think the disruption of the network we do in the rural through the network as a service will eventually should come to the metros, and that's the key point here. The second point I wanted to mention is, I know the tip is more to do with the technical stuff, but when the technicians, scientists leave the room, we need to sit down and figure out what's the commercial model going to be, whether it's a bank or a government agencies or tower companies or MNOs or OEM vendors put together, what's the commercial model to solve it. And then if they were given a target to bring the cost per GB to, let's say, 10 cents from current 1.4, 1.5, and then we had to find that path, what has to be fixed over the period of time. So I'm calling upon for the industry, OEM vendors and operators to think different. This is not something one person can't fix or demystify. It's something everybody had to think through. And decade start in 2020, internet will be a basic human right. The fact that I don't have 30 Gbps in city center Kuala Lumpur is a violation of human right. And are we ready for that day? And can that day we say that we didn't put a small cell in heart of KLCC because of there's no business case. I don't think we are in a position to say that. So time has come for us to think that through carefully.
So I guess 2 points. One is I'd like to echo this concept of simplifying things. From an investor's perspective, well, one, there's multiple types of investors, right? There's kind of the early stage investors, the mid stage, and the kind of more institutional, efficient capital at scale. And ultimately, to really change the way that networks are deployed and to really get that kind of ubiquitous coverage, you need to get to that later stage form of capital. And that requires simplification. That requires industrialization of the model. That requires kind of proving the business case, right? And that's really what we want to get to, because as soon as that happens, that's when all the big institutional players can come in and really help scale this, right? So really want to echo and emphasize, especially the concepts that Juan was just talking about. I think the second point is really around partnerships, right? And I think the TIP Forum is just an incredible example of this and how important partnerships and transparency and openness is to developing these new business models, to really innovating and to disrupting the market and moving towards a true network as a service model and ubiquitous coverage.
Great. Well, it clearly takes a village to connect all these villages. So we invite all of you to help build the technology and the solutions that we need to satisfy the need for connectivity and also the demand for all the investment. So thank you.